Welcome to Savvy Business, Life Unscripted, with your host, Christina Rivera, where our guests share their wisdom and valuable business tips, empowering our audience to expand their personal potential.
Fine, thank you.
Well, I'm grateful to have you here today to not only talk about your new book, but to talk about a very important topic, and that is customer service. It's something that we have talked about in our podcast before, but not very often. I think it's something that gets well missed with a lot of businesses. And it doesn't matter if you're a product or a service or information type business. All of it revolves around your customers being very happy and keeping them happy. And it isn't just getting them to sign on a dotted line. It's a lot longer. It's building a real relationship with real people. And you found the key. You share a little bit about your background before we get into your book.
Well, I started straight out of school, and I was very young for having that experience. Now I'm 32 years into it almost, or 31 years, I guess, and have never stopped growing and never stopped expanding. It's just been a win-win situation, and I just can't thank my people enough. And everyone seems to have just kept the ball rolling.
So what made you decide to go into dentistry in particular?
I wanted to be a dentist since I was 6 years old. I remember when I was 8 years old, but my mother says she remembers when I was 6 years old saying it. I never changed my mind. I never went wanted to be a fireman or policeman or anything. From when I was 8 years old, apparently younger, all the way through high school into college and everything, it was always to be a dentist. It was just a calling, I guess.
That's interesting because my husband was the same way with flying. His parents said when he was 3, he used to go like this and pretend he was an aircraft. Yeah. It's funny that, and you're blessed that you discovered so early what your calling was. Some people will go into what's easier, what they're told, go into that college and go into this, it makes good money, and they're miserable and not realizing that, this is where I'm meant to be, not, this is where I can make the most money.
And I was in college, and in college, you're streamlining yourself towards being an accredited member of the profession. And then you apply. And what would happen if I had applied and I didn't get in? I mean, there are people who that happens to, but I didn't have a backup. I didn't have a what if scenario. So it was always, right up until I got my first letter of acceptance, it was a little bit tenuous. Mm-hmm. And in terms of what else is there? Because I never had a doubt that I wanted to be a dentist.
Wow. It's funny because but that's good. What do they call burn the bridges? So there's nowhere to go but forward. Yeah. And I think that's somehow why the most successful people go through that, because when you have that, there is no other option but this. That narrow focus is what actually leads you to success and to building your purpose and your calling. Is that steady focus. Now, share with us you're the author of Ring the Bell for Service. I love that because when you go to a hotel, the old hotels, you ring the bell and hopefully they come out for service. Not always, but why did you choose that name and decide to write that book?
It was so I was going back and forth and round and round about the name for the book. I'll get to the content in a second. Mm-hmm. And there was a story about ringing the bell for service, and it just struck me as too coincidental that I was writing about that very thing, and that should be the name of the book. That was to say the least a moment for me when I had that epiphany.
Yeah. And I've actually had that moment where I've gone into certain hotels and you're like, ring, ring, hello, anyone there? But it's so important to be present, not only just when that bell rings, but for your customer to know that you're really there for them, and maybe not even wait for them to say, I need this, but to be there to get them what they need when they need, before they even ask for it.
Right. Mm-hmm. So in my line of work too, it's very important as well, because again, people don't ask for things that they need. They don't know what they need. They're just expecting it to just show up. So it's up to us to make sure it shows up.
Yeah, you know what? You ring for mine. One of my favorite dentists. Oh my gosh, I found him in the Bronx. I lived in Brooklyn. It was a 2.5-hour trek to go visit him, but he was just so phenomenal. I remember when I first came to him, I had broken a tooth right here, half the tooth gone. And I was like, I'm not fixing it because they said it was cosmetic in my insurance. So I just let it sit there. And he would, every time he came to visit, he was like, please let me fix it. I want to fix it. And I was like, nah, my insurance company said it's going to cost more. He's like, I'll put it down as because actually it's the same bonding you do to fill your teeth. He said, I'll just say it's a bonding that you had a cavity or something. We'll just bond that puppy and, your insurance will pay. I was like, yay! But he found a way to get my needs met and get it done. And I wasn't even thinking it was an option. So.
No, that's true. It's true.
Great customer service. So share with me, what was your basis for writing the book and why did you feel it was necessary?
I was going about my days and everything, and I kept on coming upon it to where the stories would just come to me out of a simple reaction of a patient or a customer or whatever it was. It wasn't even so much geared towards the dental office. It was just geared towards the customer service in general. And these stories kept on basically happening. They'd happened to me or to someone I knew, mostly to me. And I just kept on looking at it and thinking, well, there's something to be shared there. There's some information to be shared in that thing. So I started collecting, and it took about 5 years of just collecting stories before I finally was able to hone it down to about 15 or 16 good stories. Wow. And each story became a chapter. And then from those chapters, from those stories, we learn about something interesting and real.
Uh-huh. What was one thing? Well, I don't want you to share all your stories because then we want them to go get the book. But what's like the greatest lesson through all of your stories that you've gathered that you gained as far as customer service?
Well, I'll start right off here. The question comes to why it's important to always make the customer feel important. And it has to do with the customers when they, so to back up, when you're in an airline and you're going somewhere, do you want to feel important? Sure. So you get maybe a first class passenger ticket and you're getting in line and they call one group at a time. Mm-hmm. So they call the first class passengers. Mm-hmm. Well, if you get in the regular line, that's not good enough for the airline. So they have a carpeted line, a little carpet. It's about a foot wide or 2 feet wide and 4 feet long in a special lane for you. So my wife and I were traveling one time, and we were traveling. We got there late for our connection. We had a first class ticket for whatever. It was a long trip. And so we were the last ones stepping up to the rope right before they closed off the gate to the plane. So we just went up to wherever. And she looked at our tickets and she goes, "Oh, you could have stepped in our first class passenger line." And the difference was literally like from here, jump over to here. And that was the difference in the first class line. There wasn't a separate door or anything else. But she made it sound like, really, is this something that we're going to try to do to make our first class passengers feel this, a feeble attempt on her part to make it happen? It just didn't make any sense to me. And from that, we got we got a whole chapter out of that experience because that was a feeble attempt at gaining our trust, I guess you would say. And from what's that?
I was going to say, what goes further though? I know they try to do stuff like, oh, first class, so we're going to have this separate line here. You get to go first. But for me, some of my experiences, like I remember many years ago, I had this bad thing happen where my debit card got frozen. There was an incident. So, sometimes the bank sees, there might be fraudulent activity. So it just shuts down your card. And when you go to book a ticket at the airlines, they will hold the money, but they won't take it off until you're there at the airport. And so when I went to check in and give them the thing so they could check me in, they said, "I'm sorry, your credit card is denied." I'm like, "What do you mean?" And I called the bank. I wasn't getting through. And they're like, "I'm sorry, you can't get on this flight." I'm like, "You don't understand." And it was like, I had to get to court for something. There was something going on in New York. And I was like, this needs to happen. So you know what they did? They were phenomenal. It was American Airlines. They let me get on with a friend of mine and use their credit card. And then that friend got on the phone and gave them all the credit card information, their name, and they processed it. And for me, I've had some of the most wonderful experiences with that airline because they kind of go beyond the normal kind of narrow track to make customers happy. It's like that was an unusual situation. They could have just said, well, our rules are we don't do this. But they said, no, you have a need. We're going to find a way to fill it.
Yeah.
So it was phenomenal. Yeah.
That's crazy. Yeah, that's good. Well, another example on my part is from another chapter is why the customer is not always right. So we think the customer's always right, but they're not, and they're not, and I know they're not, but when can you tell that they're not? So one day in my dental practice, again, some of this does go back to the dental practice, but one day in my dental practice, we have a large facility, and a patient was in the waiting room. He was there for maybe a minute, 2 minutes on the outside, and the person got him and it was calling him, and she said, you can come right this way. You step into the room here. He goes, no, just a minute. I need to see the doctor. And she goes, well, you're going to meet him on the other side of this wall in just a second. We're going to step in the consult room. We have a consult room that we meet everyone in before it gets all invasive and starts to feel like something's going on there. So we can just talk and chat like adults. But he says, no, I got to meet him out here. Okay, whatever. By then I was up in the front anyway. So I walked down out there, and he says, Dr. Johnston, I need you to see something. I look at it. I said, yes. He says, the TV in your reception room. I look at it, and it's commercials at this point. It's showing commercials. I said, yes, I see the TV. It's commercials. He says, well, I'm sorry. He goes, there was a program on that TV before the commercial. It was Fox News, and that's just unacceptable to me. I said, I get that it was Fox News, and I apologize. I said, it could be CNN. It might be Fox. It could be just a show on the cable. It's whatever somebody felt like was the appropriate thing. In fact, in 4 days out of 5, it's some dental propaganda station that we've got going on out there. We're not preaching anything to you. We're not saying anything. It doesn't matter. If you come in the back, we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about your dental care. And then when you get to the way back, there's going to be a TV in your room. You can turn that on and you can change the channel to whatever you like or turn it off. It doesn't matter to me at all. He said, no, not good enough. Because you're going to need to change the channel on this thing right here. So it's not Fox News anymore. We're going to need to make that CNN. No. In an epiphany, I simply said to him, I've got a better idea. He said, oh, what's that? I said, there's the door. See yourself out. Okay. And my staff was sitting there and they're like, oh my God, he just let a patient go. But I've let a patient go maybe 6-7 times in 30 years in my life. And when he left, I had 2 other patients that were sitting there in the reception room, and they were like, golf clap, like, good job, Tim. You let this guy go, because he was going to be miserable. Nothing but a pain in the rear end. From the get-go, from the beginning of our conversations, he was just anti whatever it was. And
but that kind of attitude is a very closed attitude that, everything around me needs to think like me and be like me. And I'm like, I'm sorry, that's just not how the world operates. And then, if something goes wrong and you're working on him, you'd be like, well, of course you did it to me, doctor. And I'm like, no. Yeah. So I could totally see why you fired him. And I heard that once from a business mentor of mine. He said, you don't need to work with everyone in your business. Some people feel, especially when you first start a business, I need to take every client. And that's not true. It could be detrimental to your business.
To your psyche, your own personal psyche is not going to be very, very well treated at that point.
Yeah. And to your staff as well. Because imagine if he's barraging you on something so stupid. Imagine if there's something bigger that comes along, he'll just make all of you miserable. So that's a really good point. Because I've heard people say since the very beginning, I worked in a print shop when I first left high school. And it was like, the customer's always right. The customer's always right. And there were some really nasty customers. Yeah.
Right. That's, if I could say one thing, my book, the Ring Bell for Service, that's really the key to it, is that everybody is not right all the time. And it's recognizing when they're not right and when they are. And I get that they are often, but when they're not right, it's the best thing that you can do to dismiss them from your practice or whatever your business is before it ever becomes a business relationship.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that also they don't have to, not all customers are right, but there's a way to tell them, hey, this isn't going to work out. This relationship's not going to work out. All the best. See ya, there's the door. Because you weren't mean about it. You're just like, I got a better idea. Yeah. You don't have, there's a cordial way to end a relationship if it's not going to work out.
Right. It's like if you get a hold of the word policy sometimes. I'm a real stickler for the vocabulary in my office and what people say and how they say it. And policy to me, that's a 4-letter word. not literally. Policy is more than 4 letters. I get that, but it's the thinking of it is that it's a 4-letter word. If I'm going to tell you what my policy is, because my policies are always changing. We have ways of doing things. I get that. We'll share the ways that we do that with the people that we're going to do it with, and if we're all in agreement, great, come on back. I get that, but I don't like the word policy in reference to policies. It's silly. I know it sounds so silly, but policy is actually a 4-letter word in my office. It's one of those ones that is not used.
Well, I like that, Timothy, because the thing about it is that things are evolving and always changing, and to always say we're stuck like this is the only way we do things. Boom, the end. I don't care what client you are, what need you have. It's like this is the only way we do things. You're not going to go very far as a business owner. And now going back to the analogy of being in the airport, I had been in a situation back in my 20s where I had gone up to get my ticket, and you know how they just show it to you. And then I said, okay, great. And I was talking to her, and I was smart enough to actually at that point print out my itinerary. So all she had to do, the flight number, everything's there. All she had to do is punch it in. Somehow she gave me another flight. And I just walked away, got some coffee, chilling for an hour. And then I look and the number is different, the flight number and the time. And I go back to the ticket agent, and she's like, I'm sorry, our policy is once you leave the counter, we can't help you. And yeah. And I had a little flip attack, which I was word policy. Yeah, I know. That 4-letter word again. And I about had a little temper tantrum. And the police had to come on over and calm me down. And I said, I need to get on this airplane. And they just told me their policy is not to help me. But it got worked out because unfortunately the police had to get us to be the mediator for it. But how much have I used that particular company since? No, neither. No, not
unless you have to. It goes towards another chapter in the book about conflict resolution. And it talks about a way you can absolutely diffuse any situation is first acknowledge that there is an issue. You didn't get on your plane, whatever it is. Second, you want to show empathy. And third, you want to ask, not tell, ask for a solution. And it's just as simple as that in any conflict that you have. So for example, you say, Mrs. Jones, I'm really sorry that this has happened. It could be anything. I'm sorry this has happened. If I were you, I would feel the same way. You showed some empathy in there.
Yeah.
And then you ask, Mrs. Jones, what is it that we can do for you to make this better?
Yeah.
And then shut up and listen. And then listen for a response.
Yeah.
Right. And usually the person's response is, well, that's enough right there. You just showed me that you cared enough to make it better. Yeah. Often it doesn't cost them anything, but that goes to the point right away of, be ready to make your mark on that person. And now they may ask for the moon, which you cannot deliver. And that's when you have to say, you know what, I'm sorry. That's not going to, but instead of saying, I'm sorry, there's a certain phrase I have. You say, well, Mrs. Jones, what I can do for you is, she may have asked, can you bring the moon down here? Well, Mrs. Jones, what I'd like to do for you is X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
So you never say, no, I can't. You just are getting there a different way.
Yeah, I like that.
And people are remarkably taken by it. And it just in the beginning, when you say, Mrs. Jones, I'm sorry that this happened. It should never have happened. And here's what we're going to do about it.
Yeah.
Ooh. First of all, what can we do?
You just said something important. You took responsibility as a business owner. You said, I'm sorry this happened to you. So you're not saying, oh, this didn't happen. It didn't happen like this. You're all wrong, customer. No, it's not how it went down. Then you make them wrong. Instead, you're just like, we're just going to take responsibility, regardless if it's true or not. We're just going to say, sorry. We know how you feel. It just,
Because people are shafted too often in businesses.
Yeah. And
they just don't want another one.
Yeah, totally. And it makes so much sense. I mean, we had many years ago, and this wasn't our fault or the customer's fault. We had advertisement, a big advertiser came to do advertising with us, and the stream went down. And the moment their ad was supposed to go out, it went down. It just, boom, it was gone. Server went down. And the minute I saw it happen, because I got emails from them going, what's wrong with the server? I'm like, oh, crap. So I called the company. I'm like, hey, we need this up and going. We have advertisers, whatever. They got it up within 5 minutes. But the advertiser was like, well, we should get all our money back. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen because guess what? I ran for the rest of the month, 5 minutes of time doesn't equal you getting all your money back.
Right.
So instead of saying, no, I won't do that, I said, I completely understand. It should have been up exactly at the time we promised, but here's what I can do for you. We can offer you another half a month, half off for advertising, and plus give you 2 free whatever mentions or something. And they're like, oh wow, we didn't expect that. It's awesome. And so we didn't lose a client. They sent more people, and then they were happy. They felt they were heard, and got it resolved. So yeah, there's always a way to not make them wrong and also work together. Yeah.
Right. Very good. It's the key to the game. It's just making people happy every day.
Yeah, and I love that. For a policy is a 4-letter word. Throw that out. Don't use that anymore.
Very good.
Where do people get a copy of your book? How do they get it and find out more about it? How do they do that?
They can get it everywhere on Amazon or anything else these days. They can get a copy from I think they can get it from my site, although I'm not even sure about that anymore. If they go to Amazon and type it in there, ring bell for service, they can find it that way.
Yeah, and I see you're on LinkedIn and Facebook. If they're in your area and want to go to see you at the dentist, how can they do that?
Just call the office.
Great. Do you want to give them the number or for the office?
It's 757-564-0804. They can call there and get any of the information for any of the stuff that we've talked about.
It's called Norge Dental Center, correct?
Yes.
Awesome.
You're correct.
Yes. And I have a lot of times it's hard to find a really awesome dentist. And I could tell the way you care about your customers that you're a phenomenal dentist. So if you're in the area, where are you located again?
In Williamsburg, Virginia.
Well, wow. Close to where I grew up. I grew up in Springfield, Virginia, Fairfax. So.
Very good.
Yeah. So anyone in the area, you need a good dentist, go visit Dr. Timothy K. Johnston today and get a copy of Ring the Bell for Service to offer the best phenomenal service for your customers so you can grow your business. And I just have to thank you again, Timothy. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate having me.
Like, subscribe, and share this episode. To listen to more savvy episodes and savvy biz tips, go to www.lifeunscriptedradio.com. To find out about our paid sponsorship opportunities or how to become a guest, email Christina at lifeunscriptedradio.com.